They didn't visit me once in the nursing home until they heard what I'd done with my estate. Funny, isn't it? How love shows up in the form of phone calls and flowers only after money enters the room. For 3 years, I rotted away in that place, like old bread, left in the back of a cupboard, still whole, but stale, unwanted, and my family, my flesh and blood, vanished from my life like ghosts who'd never existed. My name is Eleanor Finch, and I was once the glue that held a rather successful, albeit dysfunctional, family together. Once, I was the matriarch of a grand old house, the hostess of glittering dinner parties, the sharp-tongued woman whose advice you took, even if it bruised your ego. My husband, Charles, passed 10 years ago. My children, Richard, Susan, and Matthew, each found a reason to drift away after the funeral, promising to check in, to visit, to call, but life swept them away into careers, marriages, and eventually a comforting forgetfulness. Then came the stroke. It was mild, thank God. I could still walk, still speak, albeit a bit slower than before, but it was enough for them to tuck me away into Silver Pines nursing facility, under the guise of care. I suppose they thought they were doing me a favor. "You'll be with people your age, Mother," Susan had said, with a bright smile, as if packing me away in a box marked fragile was a kindness. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and then came years. No one came to visit, not once. But I am not a woman easily forgotten. I made sure of that. Silver Pines wasn't the worst place to spend your final chapter, but it wasn't the kind of place you wanted to stay long enough to read the ending, either. It smelled like lemon disinfectant and wilted roses, and the wallpaper peeled in places where time had pulled at it like a child, picking at a scab. Still, I found ways to stay sharp. I read. I eavesdropped. I took walks around the garden with my nurse, Clara, an angel in orthopedic sneakers. And every so often, I'd overhear the others talk about their regrets, their children, their loneliness. Misery made fast friends out of strangers. Clara was the only one who truly saw me. She never treated me like a burden or a statistic. She listened, even laughed at my dry humor. She asked about the life I once had, and she seemed genuinely interested. One day, as we sat under the trembling branches of an old elm, I told her something I hadn't told anyone yet. "I've changed my will," I said. Her eyes flicked to me with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "Oh, yes, 3 times in fact. Each time I crossed out another name." "You're not serious." "Oh, I am," I said, leaning in with a smirk. "You see, when a person is treated like they're invisible, they begin to think invisible thoughts, dangerous ones, calculated ones. It started as an idea, a cruel, brilliant, satisfying idea. I drafted a letter, not a legal document, mind you, but something else, something far more persuasive. I wrote it with a shaking hand and a wicked smile. "To whom it may concern," I began. "You didn't visit me once, not for birthdays, not for Christmas, not even when I was hospitalized after the fall. But I forgive you, and I've decided to leave everything to someone else." That letter sat in my drawer for weeks before I sent it. I addressed 3 copies, one for each of my children. No explanation, no fanfare, just a typed letter with my shaky signature at the bottom. The effect was immediate. Within 48 hours, my phone at the nurse's desk rang for the first time in over a year. "Mrs. Finch," the receptionist said, barely hiding her surprise. "Your daughter is on the line, Susan." I smiled. "Tell her I'm unavailable." They came 2 days later. Susan first, all pearls and panic, with her high heels clicking through the linoleum like a metronome of guilt. She brought flowers, lilies, which I hate, and an apologetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mother," she began, but I held up a hand. "Ah, the prodigal daughter returns," she faltered. "I got your letter. I assumed you would. Is it true," her voice dropped, "that you're disinheriting us?" I looked her dead in the eyes and said nothing. The next day, Richard arrived. He never bothered with flowers. He brought a lawyer. Then came Matthew, flustered and overly cheerful, clearly rehearsing some long-lost version of affection he thought might earn him points. "Mom! Wow! You look great," he said, hugging me like I was a stranger he'd met at a cocktail party. "I've missed you," I laughed in his ear. "I wish I could say the same." I let them squirm for a week. I took their calls, let them take me on awkward strolls around the courtyard, listened to them fumble through forced memories, like they were pulling forgotten toys out of an attic. "Remember when we used to go to the lake house every summer?" Susan asked one afternoon, brushing crumbs off her designer coat. "You mean the one you told me to sell because it was too much maintenance?" She laughed awkwardly. "Well, yes, but still, good memories, right?" Richard, ever the pragmatic one, went straight to business. "You're of sound mind," he said, leaning in close. "The letter, was it some kind of test? Because if it was, I get it. We've been distant, but we can fix that." Matthew, bless his heart, tried a different tactic. He brought me a scrapbook, old photos, cutouts, memories glued together in desperation. I played along, let them think the door was open. Then, on a cloudy Thursday, I called a meeting. The three of them gathered in the tiny recreation room, like attendees at a board meeting they'd rather skip. Clara wheeled me in, set me at the head of the table, and left with a knowing glance. I laid the envelope on the table. "This," I said, tapping it, "is the final version of my will. It has been signed, notarized, and witnessed." 3 pairs of eyes locked onto it, like vultures spotting a dying animal. "But before I tell you who gets what, I want you to hear something." I pulled out a second envelope and opened it slowly. Inside were printouts of every missed birthday card I'd written, but never sent, each dated, each addressed, unsent, unopened, ignored. I read some aloud. November 12th, 2021. "Happy birthday, Susan. I hope you're doing well. I haven't heard from you in a while, but I'm sure you're busy. December 25th, 2022. It's Christmas, Richard. I hope you're warm and safe, and maybe thinking of your mother." I paused. Let the silence bite. 3 years. Not one visit, not one call. Susan opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand again. "And now, because you believe there's something left for you here, you remember me. How convenient." The will was simple. The estate was considerable. The house alone, a century-old estate in the outskirts of Connecticut, was worth millions. Add in stocks, bonds, art, and you had enough to feed the greed of 3 very entitled offspring. But the twist wasn't in the distribution, it was in the condition. "I've set a challenge," I said. "The estate is to be divided equally among the 3 of you, under one condition." They leaned in. "You will each spend 6 consecutive weeks living here at Silver Pines, not as visitors, as residents." The horror that dawned on their faces was worth every second of my wait. "You must sleep here, eat here, participate in daily activities, live as I have lived. You will not reveal to staff or residents why you're here. You will treat everyone with respect. If you fail, you forfeit your share. If all 3 of you fail, the estate goes to the person who's treated me like a human being these last few years, Clara." Their jaws dropped in unison. "You're joking," Susan whispered. "Do I look like I'm laughing?" To my complete satisfaction, they accepted. Oh, not willingly. There was shouting, threatening, legal bluffing. But once they realized the will was airtight, they conceded. Money is a powerful motivator. Week 1 was chaos. Susan complained about the food. Richard spent most of his time pacing the hallway, barking into his phone, even though cell reception was practically non-existent. Matthew tried too hard, making conversation with residents who barely remembered their own names. I watched from a distance, amused. Clara and I shared knowing glances. "They don't last 2 weeks," she whispered, as she adjusted my blanket during our afternoon tea. "I'm betting on 1," I replied. But I was wrong. By week 3, the cracks were showing. Richard had started avoiding the common areas altogether. He stayed in his room, only emerging when absolutely required. He looked pale, thin, twitchy. Susan had begun sleeping through breakfast and crying in the laundry room, where she thought no one would hear her. One morning, I caught her scrubbing another resident's bedpan after a nurse's aide asked for help. Her hands were trembling. Matthew, surprisingly, was doing the best. He made a friend, a Vietnam vet named Hal, who told the same story about a jungle ambush every day at lunch. Matthew listened patiently each time. He even helped an old woman find her hearing aid when it rolled under a couch. Something in him was changing. I saw it in his eyes. Humility, perhaps, or guilt, maybe both. Then came the night of the fire drill. It wasn't real, thank heavens, just a late-night systems test. But the panic was. One of the residents had a panic attack. Susan collapsed in the hallway, crying uncontrollably. Richard nearly got into a fistfight with the night nurse for not warning them. I stayed in my room, sipping tea, listening, smiling. The game was working. By the start of week 5, the energy had shifted entirely. Susan stopped wearing makeup. Her polished nails chipped away with every passing day. She had bags under her eyes and a certain softness in her demeanor. She began helping Clara distribute meals. She even held hands with a resident named Alma, a woman with severe dementia who mistook her for her daughter. Richard, on the other hand, was unraveling. He filed a formal complaint with the facility about cruel conditions and even attempted to bribe the night staff to give him early access to the estate. They refused. Clara had warned them. He began skipping activities, citing migraines and stomach issues. Though I knew it wasn't illness, it was shame. That place was a mirror, and it was showing him everything he didn't want to see. And Matthew? He surprised me most of all. He started reading aloud to residents in the lounge. He shaved Mr. Walker when the aides were short-staffed. He spent time with me, not just when others were watching, but alone, quietly, like a son should. One afternoon, as we sat on the back patio, watching sparrows peck the feeder, he said something that stuck with me. "I think I needed this, Mom," he said. "I think we all did." I didn't reply right away, but inside, I was folding that moment like a fragile keepsake, tucking it away somewhere warm. The final day arrived like a storm on the horizon. I asked the administrator to prepare a private room for a family meeting. I wore the navy blouse Charles always liked, the one with the pearl buttons. Clara wheeled me in as the 3 of them arrived, each looking like they'd lived a lifetime in 6 weeks. Susan's shoulders were hunched. Her voice had softened. She looked at me with something approaching remorse. Richard was sullen, eyes downcast, fingers twitching, like he was desperate for his phone. Matthew stood a little taller, not arrogant, just present. I handed each of them a plain white envelope. Inside, A final letter from me. To my children, it began. You have walked a mile in my shoes, and some of you stumbled, some of you found your footing. But now you know what it feels like to be forgotten, to be invisible, to cry in silence and wonder if anyone still remembers the sound of your laugh. Money cannot undo time. It cannot buy forgiveness. But it can change lives, if you let it, and I hope you do. Susan, you've softened in ways I never thought possible. For that, you've earned your share. Matthew, you've grown. You've shown heart, compassion, real character. You've not only earned your share, you've earned my pride. Richard, I love you, but you have more work to do. That doesn't mean I don't believe in you. It just means you're not ready yet. Your share will be held in trust for 5 years. If you spend even 1 week volunteering in a nursing home, it will be yours. I hope you choose to earn it. Clara, thank you for treating me like a person, for remembering me when others didn't. I've set aside a portion of the estate for you, and I hope it helps you go to nursing school like you always dreamed. The silence after they read was so thick you could have sliced it with a butter knife. Then Susan cried, real tears, not the performative kind. The weeks that followed were unlike anything I expected. Susan began visiting once a week, even after the estate was settled. She brought tea, gossip, even nail polish. We painted each other's fingers in the courtyard, like teenagers. Matthew came too, but not to visit me. He returned to help the staff. Eventually, he applied for a position in a nearby adult care facility. Apparently, he was serious when he said he needed the experience. Richard took the longest. I didn't hear from him for months. Then, one morning, Clara brought me a postcard. It was from him. It read, volunteering in Oregon, small place, 18 residents, harder than I thought, but I'm learning. Maybe I needed this more than I realized. That day, I cried for the first time in a long time. Not from sadness, but because the letter was proof that people could change, even if it took a mirror made of silence and time to show them who they really were. As I sit now in my favorite chair by the window, I realize I'm not bitter anymore. They didn't visit me once in the nursing home, until they heard what I'd done with my estate, but they stayed after they knew. Not all for the same reasons, not at the same pace, but they stayed. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know this. When I go, I'll leave behind more than money. I'll leave behind a lesson. That love without action is just a word. That presence is the real inheritance. And that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children is a chance to see themselves clearly, even if it takes a little nudge and a whole lot of tough love to get them there.